So if I told you to find the sixth most successfully developed, like, greenest nation on Earth, you'd probably start scanning Scandinavia, right?
Oh, absolutely. You'd
Yeah.
be looking for, pristine eco-cities or those massive sovereign wealth funds.
Exactly. Or like fleets of electric vehicles everywhere. You almost certainly wouldn't look at a country famous for suffering one of the most catastrophic financial collapses of the 21st century.
No, you wouldn't, and you probably wouldn't look at Southern Europe either.
Right. But according to the data we are unpacking today, you would be wrong.
Completely wrong. I mean, it completely upends our geographical and economic biases.
It really does, because we carry this ingrained assumption that ultimate human progress requires either um, vast natural resource wealth or just a hyper-industrialized economy.
Yeah, an export-driven powerhouse.
Yeah.
But the numbers we are examining today suggest an entirely different pathway actually exists.
Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission for the next hour or so is to deconstruct an incredibly comprehensive 33-year data set.
Which is a massive timeline running from 1990 all the way to 2023.
Yeah, it's a huge window. And we are looking at the Hellenic Republic, Greece.
Right.
We have this stack of multidimensional indices and raw reports, and we are going to explore human potential, gender dynamics, and planetary pressures.
To really understand if Greece, despite its well-documented economic scars, is actually this ultimate under-the-radar model for sustainable human development.
Exactly. Because what you are going to learn today is how to look entirely beyond gross domestic product.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, for decades, GDP has functioned as a somewhat deceptive cash register tape.
It just tells you money changed hands.
Right. It tells you money moved, but it doesn't tell you if the society is actually healthy or if its wealth is deeply embedded and equitable.
Or, crucially, if its economic engine is just destroying the very environment it relies on.
Exactly. And the Greek data proves that relying on those old metrics hides the most crucial survival stories of our time.
So, to understand how Greece pulls off this statistical miracle, I mean, jumping from an upper middle tier ranking in traditional development to the absolute global vanguard when you factor in the environment, we first need to understand the diagnostic landscape.
The baseline, yeah.
We have to shift from a single-dimensional view of success to a multi-dimensional coordinate system.
Which is where the traditional Human Development Index, the HDI, comes in. It was revolutionary when it debuted back in 1990.
Because it was the first time global institutions formally acknowledged that income wasn't literally everything.
Right. The HDI built this three-legged stool, basically. It measured a long and healthy life, access to knowledge through education, and a decent standard of living via gross national income.
I always think of that baseline HGI like a video game character's core stat sheet.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. In the old days, economists only cared about strength, which is like your country's raw wealth.
Yeah, just brute force GDP.
Exactly. But the HDI came along and said, wait, your character also needs stamina, which is health and life expectancy.
Yeah. Right.
And they need intelligence, representing the education system. So if you have all three, you have a viable society.
But even that three-legged stool proved, insufficient for the complexities of the modern world.
Because it just averages things out, right?
Exactly. It assumes that the average score reflects everyone's reality. So, economists added a second pillar, which is the IHDI, or Inequality-Adjusted HDI.
And this metric introduces a penalty.
Yes. It asks what happens when you penalize that baseline score for the gaps between the rich and the poor, or the educated and the uneducated.
So it essentially measures the friction in the system.
Precisely.
Like if a country is wealthy on paper, but all that wealth is locked up in the bank accounts of, 10 oligarchs while everyone else is struggling, the IHDI exposes that structural flaw.
That's the exact mechanism.
Yeah.
Then we need to understand who specifically is bearing the brunt of that friction.
Which brings us to the demographics.
Right. That requires the third and fourth pillars. The GDI, or Gender Development Index, measures the gap in those foundational achievements between men and women.
So health, education, and income.
Exactly. It tests whether the state is providing equitable capacity across genders.
But, and this is a big but, capacity doesn't always equal opportunity.
Which brings in the fourth metric, the GII.
The Gender Inequality Index.
Right. While the GDI measures whether women are getting the same education and healthcare, The GII measures the structural barriers they face once they actually try to use that capacity.
So it tracks the loss in potential due to disparities in empowerment?
Yes, like the percentage of women in parliament and their participation in the labor market. It quantifies social deprivation.
Okay, so we've mapped out health, wealth, education, and equity. We know how strong the character is and if the stats are distributed fairly.
Right.
But there is a glaring blind spot here. I mean, none of this matters if the country is literally underwater in 50 years.
Or if the air is just too toxic to breathe.
Exactly. So how does this matrix account for the physical planet?
And that realization led to the creation of the fifth pillar, which is really the absolute centerpiece of our analysis today.
The PHDI.
The Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI. This metric takes a country's baseline development score and imposes a mathematical penalty based on two specific environmental factors:
And those are,
carbon dioxide emissions per capita and the material footprint per capita.
wow. So it officially connects human progress directly to planetary degradation.
It forces a country to open its environmental ledger, basically, and subtract the ecological debt from its social triumphs.
I love that phrasing. It exposes whether a nation is genuinely succeeding or simply borrowing its prosperity from future generations.
And just hoping the ecological invoice never comes due.
Exactly. So before we zero in on the Greek anomaly, we have to establish the global baseline.
We need context.
Right. We need to understand the tide that Greece was swimming in over this 33-year period. If we rewind to 1990, the global average HDI was sitting at 0.60.
To put 0.62 in perspective, that represents a world where large swaths of the global population still lacked basic access to secondary education.
It's a very different world.
Oh, entirely. Infant mortality was significantly higher, and extreme poverty was far more prevalent.
But from that 1990 baseline, we see an incredible overarching narrative of progress, right? Because by 2023, the global average had climbed to 0.756.
That is nearly a 24.3% increase globally.
Which is huge. Over 3 decades, humanity in the aggregate became markedly healthier, stayed in school much longer, and generated substantially more wealth.
The tide was rising almost everywhere. Here at the end of the Cold War, the rapid expansion of globalized trade, significant leaps in medical technology.
It all compounded to push that number steadily upward.
Yeah, but the data isn't a perfect, uninterrupted upward slope.
No, it's not. If you trace the line graph in the report, there's a very sharp, very rare stumble right around the year 2020.
The global index drops from 0.745 down to 0.742, and it just flatlines for a bit.
Obviously, we know what caused that. But it is entirely surreal to see a global pandemic, something that felt so viscerally chaotic on the ground, just translated into a macroeconomic downward hook on a graph.
It's sobering. It reveals the actual mechanics of how a society halts, because the HDI captures the pandemic perfectly, since all three of its core metrics were struck simultaneously,
Oh, that makes sense. Schools physically closed.
which temporarily disrupted expected years of schooling. Then economic lockdowns triggered massive income losses.
And obviously, the staggering mortality rate visibly dented global life expectancy.
It was a systemic shock to the entire coordinate system. Yet the overarching trend eventually resumed its upward trajectory.
So against that rising global tide, let's map the Hellenic leap.
Let's do it.
In 1990, Greece started at an HDI of 0.770. They were already sitting comfortably above the global average.
They were ranked 25th in the world back then.
But by 2023, they crossed a psychological and, well, statistical Rubicon. Their HDI reached 0.908.
Which is massive. Crossing that 0.9 threshold officially upgrades a nation into the elite, very high human development tier.
It's a big club to join.
It is. It indicates that the average citizen operates within a system of profound institutional security.
But here's the fascinating nuance in the ranking system that I noticed. Their raw score jumped significantly, but their actual global rank slipped from 25th down to 35th.
Yeah, and that slip actually highlights the ferocity of global development.
What do you mean?
Well, over those 3 decades, we saw the explosive rise of the Asian tiger economies, right? And the rapid modernization of Eastern Europe post-Soviet collapse.
So countries were leapfrogging each other.
Exactly. So while Greece's relative rank shifted backwards slightly, their absolute internal progress was a steady, relentless climb into the highest echelons of human security.
So what does this all mean? Getting into that point 0.9 tier is a monumental achievement. But historically, the blueprint for entering that club requires a Faustian bargain.
It usually requires massive environmental destruction.
Exactly. To build the infrastructure, the advanced hospitals, the sprawling university campuses, a country usually has to rip up the earth.
They burn ungodly amounts of coal, extract heavy minerals, clear-cut forests.
And they leave a massive carbon crater behind. Which brings us to the central investigative question of this deep dive. Did Greece follow that destructive pattern?
And the environmental data from this report is nothing short of a revelation, because it proves that Greece fundamentally altered the blueprint.
When I first cross-referenced these coordinates, I honestly assumed it was a typo.
It's that jarring.
It is. We just established Greece is 35th in baseline development, a solid, very comfortable position. But when you switch the lens to the PHDI, when you penalize every country for their planetary pressure, Greece doesn't just bump up a few spots.
No, they catapult.
They shoot to the 6th highest rank globally. That's a positive jump of 29 places.
They leave traditional, heavily industrialized economic superpowers entirely in the dust.
It's incredible. It's like their absolute superpower metric.
And when we dig into the raw environmental efficiency numbers, the mechanics of this rank jump become very clear. Let's examine carbon dioxide first.
Okay, let's look at the CO2.
Production-based CO2 emissions in Greece fell from roughly 8.09 tons per capita in 1990
Down to what?
down to about 5.337 tons per capita in 2023.
Wow. Dropping your carbon output by nearly 40% while simultaneously pushing your population into the highest tier of human development is deeply impressive.
It is, but honestly, the carbon data is just the prelude.
Really?
Yeah, the truly structural shift is found in their material footprint.
Okay, define that for us, just so we're all on the same page.
Sure. This metric measures the physical weight of everything a society extracts and consumes to maintain its lifestyle. Every rock mined, every tree felled, every barrel of oil pumped to satisfy domestic demand.
The actual physical weight of the economy.
Exactly. And in 2007 and 2008, Greece's material footprint was hovering around an astonishing 30.44 tons per capita.
Over 30 tons per person. That is an incredibly heavy, resource-intensive society.
It was. But by 2023, that footprint had plummeted to roughly 14.594 tons per capita.
Wait, they cut the physical weight of their economy in half.
Down by over 50%, yes.
Okay, I have to stop us here and play devil's advocate for a second because the timing of that peak is deeply suspicious.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
You pinpointed the peak at 30 tons right around 2007 and 2008. Anyone with a passing knowledge of modern economic history knows exactly what happened next.
The sovereign debt crisis.
Yes. The Greek economy suffered an implosion so severe it nearly fractured the entire Eurozone. So, is this so-called green miracle actually just the result of a catastrophic financial collapse?
That's a brilliant question.
Did their material footprint drop simply because the country went broke and had to literally stop building things?
It is the essential critical lens to apply here. And the short answer is yes. The initial trigger for that dramatic drop was entirely crisis-driven.
Okay.
In the lead-up to the 2004 Athens Olympics and through the mid-2000s, Greece experienced a massive debt-fueled construction and consumption boom. They were pouring concrete at an astonishing rate.
Right, and when the credit markets froze in 2008 and all those harsh austerity measures kicked in, that construction sector just evaporated overnight.
Exactly. Heavy industry slowed, imports of raw materials crashed, and domestic consumption plummeted as unemployment soared.
So the initial plunge wasn't some visionary green policy.
No, it was an economic heart attack.
Which means it isn't really a model for anyone else, right? You can't advise developing nations, hey, if you want to lower your carbon footprint, just trigger a sovereign debt crisis.
Right, just bankrupt your middle class.
Yeah.
No, that is a recipe for societal collapse.
So how is this a miracle then?
Because this is where the timeline of the data set becomes vital. If we only looked at 2008 to 2012, your critique would be the end of the story.
But we have data up to 2023.
Exactly. The true phenomenon we need to understand here is what economists call decoupling, and it happens in the decade after the crisis.
Okay, break down the mechanics of that decoupling for us.
Historically, human development and environmental destruction were a tightly coupled system. They moved in tandem.
If one went up, the other went up.
Yes. If you wanted your citizens to live longer and study longer, your material footprint had to rise to pay for it. When Greece's economy crashed, both metrics dropped. The gears were locked together.
Right.
But as Greece entered its long recovery phase in the late 2010s, As their HDI stabilized and then surged past that zero point 0.9 barrier, their material footprint did not rebound.
Oh, wow, the gears disconnected.
Precisely. They decoupled. The economy stabilized, but it didn't return to the debt-fueled concrete pouring model of 2004.
So the footprint stayed low.
It stabilized right around that 14.6-ton mark, even as education and health metrics climbed to historic highs.
That's fascinating. They inadvertently broke the coupled system during the crisis, but then they actually figured out how to grow human potential without reinflating the destruction.
They figured out a new, low-carbon reality.
So what actually replaced the heavy industry? I mean, how do you fund a society of 82-year-olds with master's degrees without pouring concrete?
It requires a structural pivot toward intangible value. Greece accelerated its transition into a highly specialized service economy.
Like tourism.
Yes, high-value tourism, maritime logistics, and digital services. And simultaneously, they utilized European Union transition funds to aggressively expand renewable energy.
Capitalizing on the sun and wind in the region.
Exactly. They proved that you do not need 30 tons of physical material per person to sustain a highly developed society. 14 tons is sufficient if the economy is structured around knowledge and services rather than brute extraction.
It is an incredible evolution. They essentially discovered that they could run the national engine on half the fuel without losing any societal horsepower.
But they only figured it out because the fuel line temporarily snapped.
Exactly. It makes them an incredibly efficient development machine.
However, we have to be careful here because efficiency in resource use does not automatically translate to fairness in resource distribution.
Right. A highly efficient engine can still leave half the passengers stranded on the side of the road.
Precisely.
We know they are using fewer planetary resources, but we need to interrogate how the remaining resources are actually being divided among the citizens. We need to look at the toll of inequality. Who gets left behind?
To measure that friction, we turn to the inequality-adjusted HDI, the IHDI. Remember, the baseline HDI assumes a perfectly egalitarian society where everyone enjoys the exact statistical average.
Which is never true anywhere.
Never. The IHDI shatters that illusion by penalizing the score based on actual domestic disparities. For Greece, adjusting for internal inequality causes their score to drop from that elite 0.908 down to 0.825.
It pulls them right out of that top-tier club.
It does. They rank 31st globally on this adjusted index.
I look at that gap as a fairness tax. Because the society is unequal, they are forfeiting a significant portion of their potential. The data shows an overall loss of 9.1% of their total human development purely due to internal disparities.
And a 9.1% systemic loss is a heavy drag on a national economy. But to diagnose the specific illness, we have to isolate where that loss is occurring across those three core dimensions: health, education, and income.
Okay, let's run the diagnostic. Where is the fairness tax hitting the hardest?
We begin with life expectancy inequality. This metric measures the disparity in lifespan based on socioeconomic status. Do the wealthy live decades longer than the poor?
And what's the verdict for Greece?
In Greece, the loss here is remarkably low, sitting at just 3.3%.
Wow, that implies a very strong universal baseline. Like whether you are a shipping magnate in Athens or a small farmer in Crete, your fundamental right to survive a medical emergency is relatively equal.
Yes, the Greek national health system, despite the severe budget cuts it endured during the austerity years, maintains a deeply embedded culture of universal access.
Okay, so health is fairly equal. What's next?
The next dimension is education inequality. And here, the loss is also quite resilient at only 6.7%.
So foundational access to classrooms and universities is broadly shared across income brackets, too.
It is. It's the most robust area of equity they have.
But wait, if health only accounts for a 3.3% drag and education only accounts for a 6.7% drag, the math dictates that the final pillar must be catastrophic to drag the total average down to a 9.1% loss.
The math points directly to the third dimension: income inequality. This is the massive red flag in the Greek social contract.
How bad is it?
The loss in human development due specifically to income inequality is a staggering 16.8%.
16.8%. That is a massive structural failure in wealth distribution.
It's the weak link in the entire chain.
It makes me think of an all-inclusive resort. It's like everyone gets equal access to the pool and the gym, that's the health and education. But when you go to the buffet for income, a few guests are hoarding all the prime rib while everyone else fights over the bread rolls.
That analogy captures the friction perfectly. The state excels at providing the foundational inputs of human capital. Brains and bodies are treated with remarkable equity.
But the economic market, the mechanism responsible for actually distributing wages and profits, is highly skewed.
Highly. It is a profound contradiction.
So to understand why access to the pool and gym is so equal in the first place, we need to dive into Greece's specific triumphs in health and education over the last 3 decades.
Let's look at the health evolution first. The evolution of their health metrics is a testament to cultural and systemic durability. In 1990, life expectancy at birth in Greece was 77.3 years.
Which is already decent for the time.
It was. But by 2023, it had climbed to an impressive 81.85 years.
Nearing an 82-year national average is extraordinary. But true to form for this era, the year-by-year data reveals the physical scars of recent history, right?
You're looking at the pandemic dip again.
Yeah, there is a very distinct visible dip. Life expectancy dropped to 80.5 in 2021 and fell further to 79.9 years in 2022.
Due to the global health crisis, exactly. We are literally seeing the mortality of the pandemic etched into the demographic timeline.
But then what happens?
Well, when assessing the long-term viability of a nation's human development, we look at how the system absorbs and recovers from shocks.
And the data reveals incredible resilience.
Absolutely. After that drop to 79.9, there is a fierce, immediate rebound back up to nearly 82 years in 2023.
The infrastructure bent, but it didn't break.
Exactly. The healthcare system, supported by this deeply ingrained Mediterranean cultural fabric of strong intergenerational family support, managed to restabilize the population's health remarkably fast.
We should also cross-reference the gender dynamics within that health data because the longevity is not evenly distributed.
No, it's not. There is a pronounced gender health gap.
The data shows Greek women living to an average of 84.3 years.
While men are averaging 79.3 years.
A full 5-year gap is significant.
It points to a complex mix of sociological factors. Men in Greece historically have higher rates of occupational hazards in industries like shipping and construction.
And lifestyle risk factors, too, I imagine.
Yes, notably smoking, which has traditionally been quite prevalent among Greek men. Conversely, women, benefiting from universal health care and the protective factors to the Mediterranean lifestyle, are reaching age brackets that rival the longest living demographics on Earth.
So the physical capital is incredibly strong, especially for women. But if we shift to the intellectual capital, the education data is where the narrative shifts from steady progress to a complete societal rewiring.
Okay, let's unpack this. The education metrics are the most predictive indicators of Greece's future. We evaluate this through two distinct lenses. First, mean years of schooling.
Which measures the educational attainment of the current adult population, right?
Correct. In 1990, the average Greek adult had 7.8 years of schooling.
Basically middle school.
Right. By 2023, that rose to 11.6 years.
That is a solid, predictable upward trend. As older generations who perhaps only finished primary school pass on and younger high school educated generations enter the workforce, the average naturally rises.
Yes, but that's looking in the rearview mirror. The second metric looks directly at the horizon. Expected years of schooling.
Okay, what does that measure?
This calculates how many total years of education a child entering the school system today is statistically projected to complete.
Oh, wow.
In 1990, a Greek child was expected to complete 12.6 years.
Which basically covers primary and secondary school, graduating at 18, a standard high school trajectory.
But what does that number look like in 2023? It skyrocketed to an astounding 20.8 years.
Wait, nearly 21 years of expected schooling.
Yes.
I want to pause and map out what that actually looks like for a human life. If a child starts early childhood education at age 4, and they remain in the academic system for 21 continuous years, they are sitting in a classroom until they are 25 years old.
At least. The societal baseline expectation has shifted from a high school diploma to an advanced postgraduate degree.
That is a quantum leap.
It represents a wholesale transition into a knowledge-driven society. Culturally, Greece places an immense emphasis on formal education. Families invest heavily in private tutoring to ensure their children secure spots in competitive public universities.
Because the pursuit of higher education is seen as the ultimate vehicle for social mobility.
Exactly, which creates a massive demographic dividend.
If you have a workforce where the average entrant holds a master's degree, your economy is fundamentally insulated against the kind of low-skill automation that is gutting manufacturing sectors globally.
You are building an economy entirely on cognitive adaptability. But, and this is crucial, it also introduces a severe structural risk if the economy cannot actually absorb that talent.
Oh, Which brings us directly to the central glaring contradiction of this entire report. It is the tension that defines modern Greece.
The gender paradox. Let's lay out the paradox.
We have established that women in Greece possess extraordinary human capital. They are living past 84 years old. They are remaining in the educational system for nearly 21 years, attaining highly specialized, elite degrees.
The capacity is undeniably there.
So, if Greek women possess elite education and robust longevity, why did we see a staggering 16.8% inequality penalty in the income data earlier?
Right. Why are these highly educated, long-living women not dominating the economic landscape?
It makes no sense.
To unpack the mechanics of this paradox, we have to contrast the two gender indices we discussed earlier, the GDI and the GII. Let's start with the baseline equality, the Gender Development Index.
Which measures equitable capacity.
Greece scores a .963 on the GDI, placing them in what the UN designates as Group 2.
Meaning what?
Meaning they have a high level of equality in basic capabilities. When it comes to the raw inputs provided by the state, the system is exceptionally fair. Women and men are practically tied in education metrics.
Let's hear the numbers.
Women average 11.23 mean years of schooling, while men are at 11.91. And their expected years are incredibly close.
So they're sitting in the same university lecture halls, passing the same rigorous exams, and earning the exact same credentials. The state has fulfilled its obligation to build equitable cognitive capacity.
Exactly. The capacity is equal.
Yeah.
But the great discrepancy becomes painfully clear when we look at the economic output. Let's examine the gross national income, the GNI, per capita, divided by gender.
This is the data point that just blew my mind. Let's look at the raw numbers. The female GNI per capita is $27,067.
And the male GNI per capita is $45,015.
It is a massive gap of almost $18,000.
It's staggering.
I want you to visualize the reality of that statistic. Imagine you are a young Greek woman. You spend 20 years in the academic system. You endure the stress of the entrance exams. You write the thesis. You earn the exact same specialized degree as the guy sitting next to you.
Your capacity is objectively identical.
And then you graduate, you step out into a society, and that society inexplicably values your economic output nearly 40% less. How does a modern European economy enforce an $18,000 penalty on identical human capital?
It enforces it through insidious, deeply entrenched structural barriers. And to quantify those barriers, we shift from the GDI to the Gender Inequality Index, the GII.
Because this index ignores health and education and focuses entirely on empowerment and labor.
Exactly. Now, context is important here. Historically, Greece has made substantial progress. In 1990, their GII was a highly unequal 0.29. By 2023, it had fallen to 0.103.
That's a massive historical improvement. They rank 34th globally now.
Yes, but the devil is always in the submetrics. An improved national average can easily hide stubborn societal roadblocks. Let's isolate political empowerment.
Okay.
As of 2023, women hold just 23% of the seats in the national parliament.
Wow.
While that is a vast improvement from the abysmal 6.3% they held in 1990, 23% is still severely lagging.
It means that the legislative framework, the labor laws, the corporate tax structures, the maternal leave policies that dictate that $18,000 wage gap are still being drafted and passed predominantly by men.
Which leads directly to the ultimate pain point of the entire 33-year data set. The labor force participation rate.
Let's have it.
In Greece, female labor force participation is stuck at 44.8%. For men, it is 60%.
Wait, less than half of the adult female population is actively participating in the formal labor market?
Less than half.
That is a staggering loss of intellectual capital.
And this specific metric is the engine of the 16.8% income inequality loss. The state has successfully built female capacity brains and health, but the market and the political structures have utterly failed to grant them the opportunity to use it.
But what are the actual mechanics keeping them out of the workforce? If you have a master's degree, you want to use it. Why are over 55% of women sidelined?
It comes down to the architecture of the Southern European welfare state. Unlike the Nordic models, which provide extensive state-funded childcare and elder care, the Greek system has historically relied on the family unit.
Which almost exclusively means women.
Exactly. Women are expected to absorb the burden of care. If a society lacks affordable public childcare and simultaneously expects daughters to care for aging parents, women are forced to withdraw from full-time formal employment.
Add in a corporate culture that historically penalizes career interruptions for maternity, and you create an impossible bottleneck. It is a catastrophic waste of state investment.
It really is.
It's like you spend 21 years meticulously building a high-performance sports car, and then because you refuse to build roads with childcare lanes, you just leave the car parked in the garage indefinitely.
And the macroeconomic consequences of that are severe. When the majority of your female population is excluded from formal labor, your national GNI is artificially suppressed. The women who do manage to work face the wage gap, and the women forced into unpaid domestic labor pull the statistical average of female income down to that $27,000 mark.
Okay, bringing all these threads together, what is the final verdict on the Greek model of human development? Let's zoom out and look at their global competitiveness panorama.
Let's recap their coordinates across the matrix for 2023.
First, the PHDI, measuring planetary pressure.
They rank 6th in the world. This is the absolute superpower metric, proving massive resource decoupling is possible.
Second, the IHDI, measuring inequality-adjusted development.
They rank 31st, a notable penalty driven almost entirely by wealth distribution.
Third, the GII, measuring structural gender inequality.
They rank 34th, improved historically, but political and labor barriers remain.
Fourth, the baseline HDI.
They rank 35th, a remarkably comfortable, resilient foundation of health and education.
And finally, the GDI, measuring gender development parity.
They rank 107th. This is the glaring weak link, sharply highlighting the disconnect between the education women receive and the income they are permitted to earn.
Looking at this multidimensional map, the narrative is largely optimistic, right? But it comes with a strict caveat.
It does. Greece has birthed a new, vital archetype. They are a highly efficient, high-fairness, at least in basic services, green development model.
They have empirically proven that extreme human development does not require extreme planetary destruction. You don't need to pave the earth to educate your youth or protect your elderly.
Furthermore, their resilience in health and education outlasts economic boom and bust cycles. The cognitive and physical strength of the population remained intact even when the financial capital evaporated.
But the data also provides a crystal-clear roadmap. They have hit a developmental ceiling. To break into the global top 20 of HDI, the solution is not infrastructural.
No, they don't need to pour concrete for new hospitals. The prescription is entirely structural. They must fix the female labor participation rate and the staggering income gap.
By providing the social infrastructure like robust childcare that allows women to enter the formal economy, the human potential is already fully developed. It just needs to be unleashed.
Exactly.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want you to think about the metrics used to define success in your own country. When politicians stand at podiums and promise growth, what coordinate system are they actually using?
Are they chasing the old model of HDI burning coal and expanding material footprints just to get rich?
Or are we looking at the Greek PHDI model of decoupling growth from environmental cost?
It requires a profound paradigm shift. And I'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. We just saw that a country can provide its citizens with 21 years of elite education and an 82-year lifespan, all while cutting its material footprint in half. If a relatively small economy can achieve a very high development status while taking its foot off the planetary accelerator, what is the excuse for the world's economic superpowers?
That's a great point.
Perhaps the definition of a first world country needs to be entirely rewritten.
That is exactly the question we need to be asking. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the numbers you see in the news, look for the hidden dimensions of progress, and we will catch you next time.